Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Rachel Hout. I'm the Executive Director of the Transit Innovation Partnership, and we're so thrilled that you're here with us today to learn more about the Transit Tech Lab. So first, thank you for coming downtown on a cold afternoon to learn about this program. We're incredibly excited about this initiative and look forward to sharing a little bit more about it with you. Just so that you have a sense of the run of show today, the way that this will run is I'm going to give an overview of the program for about 20 minutes, and then we'll move into technical background on each of the challenges. The bus challenge, the subway challenge, followed by the bus challenge, where you'll hear directly from technical leads at New York City Transit about the resources available to inform the solutions to those challenges. And after that, we'll reconvene a larger group of experts for questions. And in order to make sure that everybody's questions can be answered, you may have noticed that there was a note card on your chair and a pen. We ask that you record your questions as they come up, but we won't be asking questions during the presentation to keep it moving. And put all of your questions on one card. There are not multiple cards for multiple questions. And then you can, when the presentations are done or when you're done with your questions, you can pass it to the end of the rows towards the end of the presentation, and we'll collect them, and then we'll be able to field them and sort of direct them to whoever is most appropriate to answer them for you, just so that you know. So if that's pretty clear, we will begin, and I'll give a little more background on what we're doing. I first wanted to start by thanking our partners at the MTA, and specifically at New York City Transit, who helped come up with these challenges. This is the first time that a public authority has launched a startup accelerator like this. And that is no easy task, and it shows a real commitment to modernization and openness to new ideas and new approaches. And it's really been a wonderful experience to be working with our partners at the MTA, and so inspiring to see their commitment to what they do every day, which has such an incredible impact on the city. So I can't emphasize that enough, and I can't emphasize enough how exciting and really groundbreaking in many ways this initiative is. So thank you all for getting to this point, even just this starting point. There's been a lot of work that took us to get to this point, and we're excited to be here. So we're very appreciative of that. And of course, thank you to all of you, because this is what makes it all worthwhile. So we know that the transit system is critical to our city's future. It's not only critical to things like productivity and getting people to work so they can contribute. It helps to provide access to different places of work, to public spaces. And we know that it's critical to the city being an attractive place where people want to live. And that's part of why the Partnership for New York City joined forces with the MTA to launch the Transit Innovation Partnership, which is a public-private initiative that serves as a vehicle to provide private sector solutions to help improve the transit system. And our first initiative is the Transit Tech Lab. So what is the Transit Tech Lab? It is a program that enables tech companies to propose innovative solutions to MTA challenges. And the selected companies for each of these challenges will potentially have an opportunity to pilot with the MTA for 1 year. And we'll go into greater detail about what that means. Critically, we have the support of the leadership of the MTA and New York City Transit, also reflecting the strong focus on modernization and innovation at the leadership level of the organization. And just to give a sense of, and also we'll get a little more in depth in terms of what the leadership of the MTA is. These are the decision makers and the individuals who will be guiding and ultimately leading this process and making the final decisions. And this is a big part of why we think this is such an exciting opportunity for new companies to be presenting new solutions to MTA challenges. A little bit about the MTA. I know some of you are probably very familiar with the Metropolitan Transportation Authority, and others may not be. You may think, oh, well, the MTA, isn't that the same as New York City Transit? They just run the subways. And we just want to give a little bit of basic background, just so that everyone's on the same page in case you're not aware. So the MTA, and I will not go into an in-depth, detailed overview of the MTA, because we only have 30 seconds for this part. But the MTA includes at least 5 major divisions. 4 of those are operating, which I will go over. So bridges and tunnels, the Long Island Railroad is the next one I'll go to, obviously running the Long Island Railroad, Metro North Railroad, and New York City Transit. So all of these things are within the operating agencies of the MTA. In addition to that, there's a group called Capital Construction, which works on the very large scale, very complex infrastructure initiatives that the MTA undertakes that in themselves are such massive undertakings that they require their own resources and oversight. That's things like the Second Avenue subway expansion. So that's the overview of the MTA. And just to give a sense of New York City Transit, so for this challenge, we really looked at how can we support New York City Transit. We are very excited by the Fast Forward plan that New York City Transit President Andy Byford has presented, and it focuses on 4 key tenets. If you're not familiar with it, I'd also suggest that's really required reading for this entire initiative and lab. But it focuses on buses, subways, accessibility, and people. And in this case, customer service is paramount across the board, and people, meaning the internal employees of New York City Transit, and how to further empower them and help to make the organization be as successful as possible. So New York City Transit oversees not just the subways, not just the buses, it also oversees Accessoride and Staten Island Railroad. For these challenges, however, we're focusing exclusively on buses and subways. So, what are the challenges? Just to give a background on how we got here, we started by talking with over 100 people from across inside the MTA, current employees, former employees, technologists, entrepreneurs who are developing the future of a lot of transit solutions to get a sense of what are the opportunities that we have. And we started with almost 250 different potential opportunities. And we know that the most critical thing in these types of initiatives, and I've gone through this similar process as previously I was the Chief Digital Officer for the state of New York, and before that, Chief Digital Officer for the City of New York. The key is what do we prioritize, because there's so many things that we could focus on. And we worked closely with New York City Transit to identify 2 challenges, one for subways, one for buses, that could help to improve performance and customer service, that were a good fit for something that a growth stage company or later could provide, including startups, and could be implemented in the next 2 to 3 years. So we were looking for what are immediate solutions that could be applied that make sense for this challenge. The first challenge is the subway challenge, and it asks, how can we better predict subway incident impacts? For example, an incident is something that causes a delay, and better serve customers by providing that information to customers. And if anyone, for example, saw the 60 Minutes piece with Andy Byford, you saw that in many cases, the equipment that New York City Transit workers are working with is very old. It's certainly not digital. And so there's a huge opportunity to bring more data and more accurate data into the process of that subway operation. And they're already doing great things, which you'll hear about. And there's already incredible data resources out there. But what can we do to build on that further? And especially what can we do as relates to delays, to predicting delays and to communicating that as quickly as possible to customers in a way that gives them the information that they need. The second challenge is the bus challenge. And that asks, how can we make buses faster and more efficient? And I'd add, especially in bus-only lanes. And that relates to the fact that as a whole, the city has record high congestion and traffic right now, as I'm sure you've noticed, if you're a New Yorker or if you're a visitor, you may see it as well. And that has impacted buses as well. And to give an example, while this is not the average bus speed, in Midtown, the average bus speeds can sometimes be as low as 3.4 miles per hour, which is about equivalent, not to the average walking speed, but to the average New Yorker walking speed, which I did research, and it is a little bit higher than average. And other trends have led to decreased ridership. That aside, we know that buses are, and I've been really excited to learn about this since joining the initiative. Buses are an amazing opportunity because they have ubiquitous connectivity. They are not limited to the tracks of the subway in terms of where they can go, and so there's a huge opportunity. There's also the precedent of there are bus lanes which exist, and so this really grew out of, there are currently 3,300 buses with forward-facing cameras. One option could be, could we use that feed to better identify bus lane obstructions and send out information about violations? Or are there other things that we're open to? And I think with both of these challenges, what was a really new approach for everyone in the room and everyone a part of this initiative is that instead of being super prescriptive about this is the only way that we can solve this challenge, the New York City Transit identified here's what we're trying to solve for, and we're open to new solutions and new approaches of solving for this. And as a result, we're open to expanding the pool of vendors, expanding the pool of solutions that we might be able to work with. So it's important to know who should apply, and we'll go over some of the criteria. Again, this is on the website, but we want to go through it because we want to make sure everyone's aware. So even you don't have to be a transit company to apply to this challenge, or even a mobility company. We're open to some of the technologies that could be used for this include machine learning, analyzing social media sentiment, developing predictive models, improving real-time customer communication. Most of those are in the subway category. And in the second, using computer vision, using sensors such as LiDAR and radar, or connected infrastructure, and even opportunities such as route analysis and modeling. And again, well, I'll get to it in the next piece. In terms of eligibility, applicants must meet these requirements. So we are looking for growth stage companies with innovative solutions to one of the challenges. So you will have to respond to one of the challenges. If your solution is not a fit for the challenge, it's not likely that you will participate in this program. Solutions don't necessarily need to be designed for a transit system, but again, they need to have an application that's relevant to the challenge and the potential to be applied to it. Technology must be at least in a beta version or a past prototype, has to exist and be functioning and have been successfully deployed to customers. Companies should be independently owned and operated, and subsidiaries of larger companies are not eligible. The company also has to be registered, legally incorporated, and registered to do business in New York City. Here's an overview of the evaluation criteria. So we thought it would be helpful for you to understand how your companies are being evaluated, and this is also on the website and in the terms and conditions if you want more detail. In the interest of time, I'll do sort of the higher level categories, but we can answer further questions later on. So first category is impact. Will this work in the MTA environment? Will this present a viable solution relevant to the chosen challenge? Does it have a potential positive impact on those two KPIs we mentioned, which are performance/service delivery and customer experience? The second criterion is product. So again, the product has to be post-prototype phase. You're not looking for a fully bespoke custom solution. That's part of de-risking this process, and it's the nature of the accelerator. And has to be available for live demonstration. The product also should be able to present metrics or other evidence illustrating product market fit, including if any of the products made by the applicant have paying customers. Those are usually good indicators of the success of a product. The team, we know teams are so critical to startups. A qualified, compatible team, a team that's in the financial position to participate through the duration of the TTL program. There can be no conflicts of interest, and those are also detailed in great detail in the terms and conditions. And we need representatives of the team available in person throughout the program, because in order for this to be successful, the availability to do in-person meetings, to respond to challenges is really critical through the duration of the program. And value. Does this present a new way of deriving more value from MTA assets? Is the pricing competitive with or lower than alternative solutions? Even better, does it present a potential new revenue stream or cost savings for the MTA? And does it present an opportunity to more efficiently manage infrastructure and operations? What do you get out of the program? A key part of the program is the process in place. And a lot of work went into making sure that this process made sense for all the parties. So it's an accelerated pre-approved process to facilitate collaboration. If your company is fully successful, you could be at the point of launching a pilot in June, which is an accelerated timeline for any large government engagement like this. Each application submitted is reviewed by relevant domain experts at New York City Transit, which means that there's access to relevant decision makers and subject matter experts and exposure to MTA leaders, private sector investors, and industry experts. So again, this is an opportunity that for your technology to be at the table with the individuals who are running the system, who are operating it, for evaluation and deeper discussion if it's a fit for one of the challenges. You'll also be able to take advantage of, if selected, 8 weeks of programming. That's the accelerator portion of this for finalists with a customized plan to evaluate technical integration. And that's an invaluable opportunity, we feel, to refine your technology and understand what it takes to work in the nation and the North America's largest transit system. And finally, the opportunity to participate in a year-long pilot, to be able to point to that case study and to be able to deploy your technology at scale. So key dates, I'd love to share a little bit more about the dates of the program, just so that everybody's aware. So first, applications are due November 30th. We strongly encourage you to start your application, just so that you're aware of the application process and questions. You can find information on transitinnovation.org, and you can, transitinnovation.org, and then you'll get the link there to f6s.com, which is the application website where you'll submit your formal application. I'd also like to give a quick shout out, even though she's furiously working. And I should have mentioned at the beginning, so Natalia Quintero is standing at the back. She has organized this entire event. Natalia is the director of the Transit Tech Lab, and she is your best resource for any further questions on a day-to-day basis, understanding what's necessary. She'll be here to answer questions as well in person at the conclusion of this program, but also online, and happy to field all those questions. She joined us recently and has hit the ground running and is doing a fantastic job. So I think you'll really enjoy working with her. So to go back to the timeline. So again, applications being key. The due date is November 30th. We'll have one more in-person webinar, which Natalia is going to be running, and then the applications are due on the 30th. The next key date is the semi-finalist demo days. So after applications, the MTA and New York City Transit, with advice from our private sector evaluators, will weigh who they'd like to hear more from, and those individuals will be invited back for an in-person demonstration of their technology and presentation on the 15th, 16th, and 17th of January. So the first 2 days, one's for subways, one's for buses, so it'll be one or the other for the 15th or the 16th, and then the 17th will be for those who can provide more information and do live demos of their technology. After that period, we'll have enough information to make decisions. New York City Transit and MTA will identify who they want to be working with. Those individuals will be notified, and the accelerator will start February 25th, 2019. Following the conclusion of those 8 weeks, there will be time to regroup, understand, and evaluate the success of the accelerator, and those companies chosen for pilot would begin June 10th of 2019. So I know that's a lot of information, but again, we're happy to answer more questions at the end of the presentation. And of course, via email and online, we'll continue to answer more questions along those lines, in both programmatic and technical questions. So as a next step, we're going to do a slightly deeper dive on the technical backgrounds of each question. And so quick show of hands, who here has been to the transitinnovation.org website and actually clicked on the links under resources and FAQ? Okay, so maybe about 30% to half of you. There is a lot there, and I strongly encourage you taking a look. And so I'm very excited to welcome up Kurt, who's going to share a little bit more about what these resources offer and other information that you might want to know.
Hi, so I'm Kurt Raschke, Manager, Technology Initiatives, Subway's Technology, Preparedness, and Communications. Taking a step back to look at sort of the challenge as a whole, when we talk about incident impacts, it's important to keep in mind that the subway system deals with incidents all day long, every day. And a lot of these are minor and they're resolved quickly and life goes on. When we talk about incident impacts, there's really sort of a tipping point. It's that point where we go from everything's fine and we're coping with whatever's happening out there to all of a sudden, you see those awful pictures on Twitter of packed subway platforms and, et cetera, et cetera. And that's really the thing we don't necessarily always have a good handle on is, are we on the cusp of, falling into that crisis situation where we go from, everything's fine, but, there's a few delays here, a sick passenger there, this or that, a train with a door problem, and then all of a sudden it's a crisis, and how did we get here? There's always that sort of, it's the straw that breaks the camel's back, and that's what we don't always know. We don't always have clear visibility into, hey, we're one failure away from a crisis. If we get one more stalled train, it's over. That's it for the rush hour. That's the kind of thing we don't always have visibility into. Now, we've got a lot of data, and to be clear, this is just what we're able to release at this point to sort of support people in preparing their applications. This is what we've been able to provide to the partnership publicly to support preparing applications. There may be more that we can share with the applicants that actually get into the accelerator. What is all of this? We've been able to release an archive of a couple of months worth of train movement information, so historical arrival time data. We've been able to release an archive of alerts that were sent out. We also have, that there's obviously current data as well. So, if you want to work from now until the 30th, you can certainly work with the live real-time data that's available for alerts and arrivals. We have data on planned service changes as well. We also have just the base schedule, if that's useful to you. And then we have a new dashboard, which has a wealth of information available. And this goes back, I believe, actually at least a year now for most of the metrics. And so this is major incidents, service delivered, some of the new metrics that we're using actually, because we're moving away from some of the old metrics like on-time performance and weight assessment. So we have things like customer journey time. We also have metrics around cars and station environment. And this is all available on the MTA dashboard, actually. And so again, this all sort of feeds into this sort of, not just, it's not, oh hey, we're going to have a sick customer at West 4th Street tomorrow at 8:30 a.m. Of course there's going to be a sick customer somewhere. It's really more the sort of, where is that tipping point where we go from, we can cope with these things, to all of a sudden we've lost that resiliency, we've lost that capacity to cope, and now we just, we're sort of one failure away, one stalled train, one door problem away from, these nightmare commutes that you hear about on Twitter and so on and so forth. That's the sort of thing that if we can see some solutions to help us get a better sense of when are we at that tipping point so that we can take corrective action before that happens, that's something we'd love to see.
Thank you. And just a note on logistics. So if you do have questions related to subways, the subway challenge, and you already know what they are, if you want to write them down and pass them down to the end of your row, and that way we can begin to review while we move into our next presentation, which is on buses. But just one note on the subway challenge is, one of the things that was really fascinating to learn about as we got to better understand the transit system is that the level of interoperability of the system is extremely high, and there are a few other systems in the world that match it, and interoperability being the ability for a train to, for example, run, when you hear about planned service changes, run on a different track than it might normally do, or run a different line than it might normally do, which creates enormous amount of flexibility, but it also makes modeling so much more challenging. And that's why we're excited about the advances, for example, in artificial intelligence and machine learning, because manually modeling these out is a lot more challenging than potentially using the data that Kurt was just talking about, and they've made available an enormous amount of data, including historical train arrival times, and using machine learning algorithms to predict when those delays will happen, and potentially cross that with inputting new incidents so you can make better predictions. So it's really fascinating that the data advances that there are really extremely relevant that we've seen in sort of the AI sector as well. So very excited about that. And there are they've seen declines in the number of delays, but there are still tens of thousands of delays per month. And so solving this can have a real impact on at least providing that information on customer service. So next up, we're going to hear from Sunil, who's going to talk a little bit more about the resources and the specifications and questions around buses. Thank you, Sunil.
Thank you. Hi. Thank you for coming by. My name is Sunil Nair. I'm the Chief Officer for Bus Technology Systems at New York City Transit Department of Buses. I just wanted to draw your attention to the chart on the upper right-hand corner, just to give you a sense of what the issue is before we get into the technology aspects. The chart shows the M101 bus line down Lexington Avenue, southbound from 96th Street to 68th Street. If you notice, the chart shows median bus speeds on the vertical axis and the times from 7 a.m. to 11 a.m. What you notice is in the morning when the rush is not that much, between 7 and 8, the average bus speeds are around 8.5 miles per hour, which is good considering New York City traffic. But as you start to get into the rush hour between 8 and 9, the bus speeds change from 8.5 to 5.5. 10 o'clock, it changes to 4.5. So we're really looking at a reduction of 50% in terms of the average bus speeds. Bus speeds change from 8.5 miles to 4 miles per hour, and sometimes even less, as Rachel was talking about. So really, that's a 50% reduction in bus speeds, which means it's a double sort of increase in terms of the customer journey time. So that's a real problem. And what is the real problem? I've checked out on M101. It's really vehicles blocking the bus lanes, and you see it. You have delivery trucks that are on the bus lane, and that's permanently blocked. You have cars using the bus lane. You have cars parked in the bus lanes with buses using regular lanes. So I think the challenge is very clear. How do we identify obstructions and blockages in the bus lanes, and not just identify, but think of effective solutions that will allow us to maybe develop a punitive mechanism, work with City DOT and develop a punitive mechanism to get these lanes cleared. So really the issue is, how do we make our bus lanes completely clear so that our buses can run at their regular speeds? So the challenge, as Rachel was talking, can we leverage existing onboard infrastructure in terms of cameras? 3,300 of our 5,500 buses have these forward-facing cameras. It's installed, it's ready. Our buses have cellular capabilities. All these cameras are connected back to the cell. All the buses have 4G LTE cellular connectivity back to Verizon. These cameras record the videos, the forward-facing camera record the video in real time, and all the videos stored on the buses for 30 days, so you have access to the videos. You have access to Wi-Fi at the bus depot so that you can download the videos. You have access to power at the bus depot so that you can work with our depots to install infrastructure on our buses if that's required. So we are here to completely support you in the development of these solutions, in order to get going and get our lanes clear. And this is really a specification of the camera. This was actually on the website that Rachel was talking about. The specification is out there. The camera specs are there. You can look at the camera specs. And as we had talked about, this is not completely prescriptive. This is our thinking. You can use the forward-facing cameras, but if there are any other ideas, technologies, machine vision learning algorithms that you can use, either utilizing the existing camera or adding any new technologies that we haven't thought about, well, this is our chance. Let's just bring it on. So that's really all I had. So that's
great, perfect. Oh, thank you, Sunil.
Yeah.
Great. Thanks. So we've already gotten a few questions, and now please feel free to share more of your questions. We want to make sure that everyone has a chance to ask them. So just to go back, there's further resources here. Again, this is the resources that you can find at transitinnovation.org, and they're fascinating. And I think they'll also be very informative to have the best possible presentation or application that you can have when you apply for the Transit Tech Lab. So again, fast forward, the plan to modernize New York City Transit, which President Andy Byford recently released, the subway performance metrics dashboard, base subway schedules, train arrival times, as well as historical train arrival data. That's all available for download in raw data format. The bus challenge, again, has the New York City Transit bus performance dashboard, the schedules and route locations, the specifications for the cameras, if you're interested in working with those feeds, and there's also a sample video feed from the camera. So if you want to start, if you are, have your own computer vision technology and you want to start analyzing if it could work with that feed, if that's there. So again, here are those key dates. So please continue to jot down your questions. And I think now we will invite up our MTA and New York City Transit panelists, and I will basically be sort of routing the different questions, and I'll answer the ones that are relevant to sort of the programmatic overview or the strategic overview of the program. So if you are all interested in taking a seat, not to be too formal, again, we're excited that everyone's sharing their time, their expertise. Okay, so I think I'll start with some of the strategic ones before moving into more of the technical questions. So some of these are very broad and strategic, and some of these are more are very detailed and technical. So I'll start with some of the more strategic ones. So how is this different from other initiatives, for example, NYCX, Moonshots, MTA Genius Challenge, and I'll take that one. So first, I'd like to note that I want to acknowledge Maria Gotch, who is the President and CEO of the Partnership Fund for New York City, who has been an invaluable resource in shaping this program. So she's actually the real pioneer in creating the FinTech Innovation Lab and other innovation labs that were the model for this initiative. And the FinTech Innovation Lab has been running for many years now and successfully created collaboration between the financial services sector and startups. And so that was really our model when we started. And that shows a little bit about how this is different. And where it's unique is that, where it's a little different from typical accelerators, is that we're really focused on that collaboration between the larger institution, in this case it's New York City Transit and the MTA, and the startups, and helping to make that collaboration as successful as possible. So thank you for that guidance. And having also been involved in other design challenges, hackathons, et cetera, throughout my career at the city and the state, what's unique about this program is that first it's outcome driven. So by being specific on the challenge, I think some of the things that distinguish it is it was very clear on the challenge to make sure that this is something that would be workable and beneficial to New York City Transit, but also open enough to welcome range of different approaches to that. And another key element is that it's pilot oriented, and the program is meant to drive towards providing access and exposure to decision makers who are interested in these solutions and leading to a pilot that can have impact. So again, it's the speed, it's the deployment being baked into it, And I think that those are really, and it's expanding the universe of technology solutions available to New York City Transit that make it unique. More specific question is challenge number 1, subway challenge, customer focused or agency focused. Again, the criteria for each of these was, will it impact performance or customer service? I'd say that the customer service is a little more of the focus on the first challenge, but I think like all of these, these are very, it's sort of hard to distinguish, this is only going to help one group or the other. I think they'll help across the board, both internally and externally. And I think that, again, the focus being improving customer service, but I think that there's different elements there, but feel free to jump in if that's not accurate. Okay, so then we'll get into some of the more very specific questions. First question, this question I'm actually not clear on, so if this was your question, feel free to just specify a little bit further, and I'm sorry, we should have asked you to list your names here. But what is the distance for the subway demo, I think it says?
That's my question.
Okay.
So you have 665 miles of track. If we want to come in and do a fiber optic sensor for your trains where they are, we're not going to do 665 miles on a demo project for a year. Okay, so is there a distance that you have envisioned or a line or part of your subway system that you would consider as that for the demonstration?
So I'll just respond just because I think it'll be helpful to understand the framing of the program. So those types of conversations would happen after the application phase, and I think what you can present is here's what we propose. Here's what our technology.
I guess what I'm saying is, if you tell me 665 miles out of the box, I'm not participating.
Okay.
Okay.
And that's totally.
So I mean, I really want to have a semblance as to, are we wasting our time and yours?
And I think that that's a fair question.
And being a New Yorker, I understand that you could probably look at certain subsets of your transit system and extrapolate from there.
Okay. So I mean, I'd say it's application. I don't know if anyone wants to add anything further, but I think that would probably, we can follow up offline for more detail. But again, at this phase, the first step is the application, and here's what we're willing to do. Here's what our technology does. Here's where it's deployed, et cetera. And then after that, there would be the more intensive, back and forth. We know that these teams are doing this in addition to their day jobs. And so the role of the Transit Tech Lab team is to lessen that sort of the time intensiveness of the program, and that's why we've structured it the way that we have.
I think it's safe to say we would not ask anybody to do 6,000 miles of cabling as part of this demo.
So this is a question that perhaps I'm feeling like it's more of appropriate for the individuals who are handling direct communication with customers, but this is a subway question. So if New York City Transit knew 30 minutes ahead of time that you were, quote, on the cusp of a temporary crisis, what types of actions are available for you to take? And I mean, I can share some of the discussions that we've had, which is just on the customer service side is helping to prepare people for that, but I don't know if there's anything that you want to add in terms of what you do.
Yeah, I think in broad strokes, we've tended to be reactive in our messaging. It's, there's delays on the F. It's not, hey, if you ride the F, there might be issues this morning, you might want an alternate route. It's generally reactive. It's once something has already happened, then we're telling you that something is happening now. It's not the sort of proactive, watch out, there could be a problem here, here, or here. Here are some alternate routes you may want to consider. So yeah, being able to shift our messaging, because one of the, and social media analysis has come up a couple of times. Nowadays we're constantly chasing Twitter because it seems like our alerts, our official messaging is always one step behind, because people are tweeting about the disruption on their commute basically instantaneously. It takes a while for information to percolate through our official channels, and by the time we get an alert out, people on Twitter are saying, yeah, I knew about it 20 minutes ago because my buddy was tweeting about it, that he was stuck on a train or he was stuck on a bus. And so we seem perpetually 15, 20 minutes behind. And so being able to pivot from being reactive to being proactive and actually, again, I say to focus quite so heavily on Twitter, but basically being able to beat Twitter and be out there in advance of these things, that would do a lot for us from a customer service perspective.
Yeah, that's a great point. Thank you. Does the question here, does the applicant have to be a U.S. corporation? Can it be Canadian? The answer is yes. It does have to be registered to do business in New York, which even if you're not registered, I think you still have time to do that within the parameters of the program. Second part of it, does the challenge include integration of equipment onboard subway cars to collect additional data to assist in predicting equipment failure before it happens? So I would go back to the process there, which is, I think it's a case-by-case basis. Present what you have in mind and how it relates to the challenge. It all comes down to if you can help to identify this challenge, and if this is doable in the time period, then that should be a part of your application. And at this point, it is something worth evaluating. I don't know if you want to add to that further, but I think it would. I think depends on a lot of variables.
Yeah, I mean, in broad strokes, and this goes for subways and buses, the onboard environment is challenging, which will come as no shock to anyone who builds equipment for a mobile environment. But that's not to say that we couldn't have that conversation on a case-by-case basis.
Can I just elaborate on that? The time frame to put the stuff on board equipment doesn't jive with the June time frame for integration, test, everything. Is there any possibility of that time frame being extended?
So that's a conversation we'd have to have in the specific case and really see what we're talking about. Yeah.
What do you mean by efficient, faster, or greener? I would say both. Faster should also make it greener because there's less idling and there's the vehicles are being used more efficiently. So I'll jump in there unless you want to add another definition of efficient. Okay. Okay. This is this is a little more on sort of the bus lane policy. To clarify, at 10 a.m. for Sunil, and I apologize, I don't know the answer to this, and we can get more detail if we're not sure. At 10 a.m., when bus speed is lowest, is it or is it not legal for vehicles to be in the bus lane? And
right. From what I understand, we have to look at the policy clearly, but I think the fact that vehicles can park in bus lanes starts at 11 a.m. I'm not sure about the exact time, but I believe it's 11 a.m. People can start to park in bus-only lanes. But until then, they're not supposed to use the bus lanes. Which is why on the graph, I showed you from 11 onwards, you don't notice much of a difference in speeds at 11 or at 10. Because you know what, at 10 o'clock, your bus lanes are blocked. So even after your open lane policy starts, there is not much of a net effect. So, but I believe it's 11 a.m. But we can check the policy exactly, and we can.
And we'll add that to the resources on the website as well, since that's very relevant. Sorry. So this is a bit of a more hypothetical question for buses. Okay. What corrective measures are you able to take if you have, or if you were to have, real-time data about bus lane blockages? I think, I don't know if there immediate thoughts there.
So real-time, we can't do much because it's a situation where you have a vehicle blocking your bus in real time. But what we can do is work with City DOT and develop appropriate punitive measures for lane violators after a sufficient warning period that you're putting a program in place. But real time you can't honk at the person, So real time you can't do much, but you can work with city agencies to develop appropriate punitive measures. And once you develop those punitive measures, word that these punitive measures are in place is going to make sure that your lanes would be less blocked as the program gains steam. So.
A question regarding the subway challenge. is the MTA able to know the amount of demand at each station, in parentheses, for example, how many people are on the platform in real time currently?
We have some customer metrics, not real time, but we do have modeling that gives us a reasonable estimate of demand, on a station-by-station basis.
So going back to a bus question about the OBD ports. So very technical. Are they rectangular or round?
We need to get back to this.
Okay, we'll get back to you on that. And you have the 9-bin or J1962.
Yeah.
Are accessorized vehicles equipped with OBD ports?
Yes.
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 And are vans and trucks in work crews equipped with them?
It depends on the model of the vehicle, but I think we can get back to them at the end.
Okay, so we'll get back to you on
But
both of
accessorized,
those.
yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the number of companies selected, I'm guessing that is how many companies will be selected. We haven't decided yet on a pre-approved number of companies per challenge, and that will depend on the applications. Okay, so it's quite a few of them. Let's see where we are. So this one, I'm sorry, I'm not able to totally read this one. Would something be able to help with the bus or subway challenge?
Oh yeah, so that was my question. So with like floating car data, like data from like Inrix or here TomTom kind of stating how personal vehicles are moving through the city, would that be potentially useful in completing the bus or even giving kind of a base reality for the subway challenge? Say, this is how fast personal vehicles move through the city, so this is how, this would be a baseline for maybe how quickly subways are moving through tunnels.
So what you're saying is having real-time information about the movement of private vehicles, is that going to be beneficial for buses?
Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely, because we already run a program called Bus Time that has time-based predictions, and having more information in a real-time manner about vehicles would refine the predictions algorithm, so definitely. Yeah.
And of course, it comes down to how you put it together to respond to the challenge, because that data doesn't exist, but how it's made useful. Okay, so here's a question I'm not really sure how it relates to the challenge, but it says, what does the MTA currently do with the data today? I don't know if you have more question about how that relates to the challenge, if you want to provide more detail, whoever asked that question. Okay.
I didn't ask it, but I do have a very similar question.
Okay, well, we'll go to follow-ups after this, if that's okay. Okay, well, if there's any more detail on exactly, I don't know if it's related to, what's currently, if it's currently being used to identify obstructions, for example, or not currently.
We don't use data currently to identify obstructions, but we get a macro picture. Just from viewing the forward-facing camera, you get a macro picture of the amount of lane blockages. So, I mean, one thing that I did not mention is on the M101, if you go to Google Maps, you will see cars blocked on those same bus-only lanes. So, it's, yeah.
Okay, and the next two questions are a little more about sort of the overarching program. So in the best case scenario, how would a pilot benefit the MTA and the selected startup pilot partners? And then potentially speak to the potential for subsequent, business, partnership agreements, et cetera, with the MTA upon a successful pilot. So I think, it is important to note that in this inaugural year, the pilots are unpaid. The companies do keep and retain ownership of their IP, and the MTA will get a license for the duration of the pilot to use it, as well as a period afterwards, which is about a year, and that's, for a number of reasons, but just to ensure that there's flexibility. And I think that there's a number of options. So first, best case scenario is that, at a minimum, we hope that this is an opportunity for companies to get their technology in front of decision makers at the MTA and New York City Transit if you're chosen for a pilot, if you're chosen for the accelerator, it's an opportunity to refine your technology to meet the needs of the largest transit system in North America. And then if you're chosen for the pilot, being able to use, for example, your point to that product, point to your success, working with the MTA, we feel there's real value there. Obviously for the MTA and New York City Transit, being able to point to measurable improvements and improvements in performance, improvements in customer service are really where we see sort of the best case scenarios here of structuring this in the right way. In terms of what happens after a pilot, if it's successful and if there's real promise there, the sort of standard route is that the MTA would issue a competitive RFP in most scenarios. But I understand there are other options depending on the scenario. So I don't know if we want to add anything to that or if that's a good.
Sure. I mean, I think if your firm did a pilot with us, and if we love the idea and decide, wow, we want to implement this technology or similar technology, then it depends on the situation. If you've demonstrated to us something that we want, but that other companies could do, it's likely that we would initiate a competitive solicitation for that type of product. I think if your firm had participated in the pilot program, it would probably benefit your firm in competing in such a solicitation. There are other situations where it could be the case that the product you're offering us is something that is very unique to your firm and that other firms are not in a position to provide, whether because of intellectual property rights or because it's so unique, in which case it's possible that we could negotiate a contract directly with your firm. But I would anticipate that in most cases, we would expect to do a competitive solicitation. I would also think that if your firm is selected for a pilot, that would certainly be a very beneficial experience for you and would certainly aid you in a subsequent competitive solicitation.
So so that, I believe, concludes the questions that we have. Are there any follow-up questions of things that we did? We know that we're going to get back to you on the OBD ports. And if there are any other questions, we're happy to take those from the audience. Okay. So
I had a question on my card. Is your presentation online?
Oh, this presentation will be made available online, and we'll send
Okay,
you all the link
thank
to it. Yes. Sorry about that.
Yeah, so the similar question.
And if you can state your company name,
Yeah, of course.
that would be great.
So I'm from Zanavi Data. We're a data science and AI company in Connecticut. So the question is, the data that you guys currently have about delays in the subway, obviously there's some sort of channel of communication by which like the signs on the platform get delay information, right? If the train's 10 minutes delayed, it'll say so on the sign. How much of that is built on like predictive modeling that you guys have already done, and how much of it is just based solely on how far away the next train is?
The second, they're all driven off of real-time data. It's actually where the trains are.
Okay.
Yeah.
There you yes.
For the bus challenge, will any feeds be available from traffic cameras? So I know New York has a lot of traffic cameras as well.
At this point, no, because we'd have to work with City DOT on getting you the feeds. But you have a direct forward-facing camera feed in high resolution, full time. So, but no, we don't have access to the traffic camera feeds. But I believe the traffic camera feeds are public feeds. So if you want to sort of stream the feeds separately, you can get the feeds.
And yeah, I was just going to add that I believe that those are publicly available.
Yeah.
We can explore that further and see how we can help. We being the Transit Innovation Partnership, because we do work with the DOT as well on the Transit Innovation Partnership. So first, I think we have one there, maybe that was answered.
You go ahead. I have two questions. Okay, two quick questions. When between November 30th and January 15th, 17th, when are you going to select? Do you have a date as far as who you're going to select for the semi-finalist demo day?
We will, for us, it really depends on how many applications we get. So at this point, it's difficult for us to give an exact date about when you would be notified if you're attending or not. We're aiming to give as much notice as possible, is really all I can say at this point. But we're hoping for it to be, well in advance. Obviously, we know some people may be traveling to attend that, and so we'll try to give you at least a bit of time to schedule for that.
By the way, it's Marvin with Visual Ops. The CBTC that has been planned, can you elaborate a little bit on whether or not, because I keep hearing stories that it's a prototype or it's in a testing concept phase. Can you tell us a bit about whether or not you feel confident about it, or you're still kind of gray about it, or giving more color around that?
I assume you're talking about ultra-wideband, that, or? Yeah.
Well, it's
the ultra-wideband part, implementation of CBTC, or CBTC in general? Because CBTC is already deployed in some lines. Yeah. I think that currently ultra-wideband is being evaluated and tested.
I guess that's what I'm asking.
Yes, yeah. I mean, again, I am not the expert, but my understanding is that this is, CBTC can be aided by technologies, including potentially ultra-wideband. This is communication-based train control. Ultra-wideband is being evaluated as a potential, mechanism to accelerate its deployment, and I believe it's currently under evaluation. But yeah, I wouldn't say it's terribly relevant to this. It could be.
At least one contract has been awarded to do an ultra-wideband pilot. CBTC is already in use in revenue service at New York City Transit on a couple of lines. Ultra-wideband, at best, would facilitate, greatly simplify the installation of wayside CBTC equipment. So it would be an adjunct to CBTC, and it would simplify the rollout process for CBTC.
Yeah, it's not equivalent to CBTC.
Hi, it's Jessie Lazarus from Carmera, and I have a clarifying question about the bus challenge. Is the challenge actually as broad as making bus lanes or buses faster and more efficient? And would that include the sort of effort in the fast forward plan to reimagine bus routes, or is it more limited to the actual bus lanes and punitive measures that might mitigate or eliminate those blockages?
I would say the former. You have ideas on enforcing bus lanes, bring it on. If you have ideas that's relevant to the fast forward, please send it on. Okay. Oh yeah, absolutely. We want this challenge to be as broad-based as possible, but we want to solve this particular bus lane challenge. Yeah. Just to move our buses faster on those lanes. But you have ideas that are relevant to the fast forward, please. And
there are common decision makers in those discussions.
Hi, Ron from Ability Insights. Is there on the bus line as well? Is there a public bus priority system today in the city?
There absolutely is. We've installed traffic signal priority on 12 routes right now, and we should have a total of 15 by 2020.
Is that because you alluded for the relationship, the complicated maybe relationship with the DOT? Is this an MTA thing? Is this a partnership with the DOT? How does this work?
So traffic signal priority is definitely a partnership with City DOT, and it's been working really well thus far because they are the ones who control the lights and give priority to our buses at the lights. So it's been working really well.
Hi, I'm Jamin from Dash. We're a connected car platform. Well, first, Rachel and Natalia, I know you guys, thank you for this. It's an amazing initiative. I've got two questions. The first one is, what is the expectation of commitment during the initial 8 weeks? Is there a physical location? Do you want people there? How much of the day do you expect?
So I can speak to that, and we're currently refining the programming. But again, this is also in addition to everyone's day job, so we want it to be enough that it will be valuable and will facilitate a successful collaboration, but we are not expecting companies to co-locate. We envision something akin to the first day of the program or towards the beginning, having a kickoff with the decision makers and doing a deeper dive to understand the operating environment of the respective challenges. And I think after that point, and Natalia and I will be facilitating this, weekly check-ins, but I think that those could be, I think it depends on the nature of the, how much hardware is involved versus software, et cetera. Weekly check-ins to make sure things are moving smoothly. I think in some cases that could be via phone, sometimes that can be in person. And then I'd say a handful of other smaller but senior meetings to have exposure to your solution to make sure that things go well. So we'd say, so we don't yet have a specific amount of time, but you don't have to expect to, relocate you and teams that are based elsewhere. We're really asking for, really 1 or 2 people who are able to be here. It doesn't have to be moving the whole team. So, but again, we want it to be enough that you have a real understanding of the technical requirements and the operating environment, so you can build something that works. And by the end of that 8 weeks, you have a good sense of how the teams work collaboratively together, and hopefully a look at how the technology is working.
Can I just ask my second question? What are your expectations about communication of the success of the pilot, the accelerator, either publicly or between the cohort of companies? And the reason I ask this question is because we did a year-long pilot with the DOT on a Vision Zero initiative, where we put a lot of, we knew there was no revenue coming out of it, but we put a lot of effort into integrating. And at the end of the pilot, it was complete crickets about the success of it, and we actually had to file a FOIA request to try and understand how the pilot worked out, which is really not optimal. How would you guys do expect to run?
So I think in the terms and conditions, we do talk a little bit about, we do expect to, we at least have the opportunity to announce the companies chosen for pilot. And I think we want to be respectful, of everyone involved. But we would not envision this being, a secret initiative. I think we would be looking at this as an opportunity to show how the MTA is embracing innovation, and to, especially given that, this is a year-long pilot, to acknowledge the, the work and the learnings from the companies that were there. So it's I think there's always sort of case-by-case basis, but I think the spirit of this is open, is collaborative, and we want to be recognizing everyone's participation. Any other questions?
I had one. Frank Kopus with Move It, just kind of related somewhat to his question. So can you talk a little bit more about the accelerator and the pilot? Like, what do you envision those? Like, is it a lab environment? Like, what's happening during, say, the accelerator phase?
So the accelerator is really, I'd say more of a series, more programming sort of early on to set expectations and understanding the operating environment. And so that first kickoff meeting could be probably a little bit longer, and ideally you are doing some kind of a in-person visit to understand and see the operating environment of the challenge folks that you're working with. Probably in addition to that, another sort of two or so in-person meetings with leadership to acknowledge that, and then after that point, check-ins to see how it's going, to see how technology is being refined. It sort of depends on the pilot, but again, it's not. There's not a physical space for companies that are located in other places and do need to relocate. We do actually have offers from a number of co-working spaces if you do need a physical space, but it's more a series of meetings and sort of programming to facilitate the conversation, and then at the end of that 8 weeks, then the pilot would kick off. And again, the sort of in-person commitment, I wouldn't say is beyond that, but it's a year-long pilot. I don't know if that answers your question.
Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, hopefully last one. My name is Isabella, I'm from VIA. I just have a quick logistical question, if you will. Are there any key components to the application to be aware of, or is it truly just as broad as like a proposal for one of the challenges?
I'd encourage you to check it out. It's very easy to get to. So it's on f6s.com, and it's pretty straightforward. Again, we didn't want to make it, you know, it's not like a government RFP. It's not, you know, pages and pages. It's probably more similar to an application for any sort of private sector accelerator. And the best way to do it, you know, we could go through the questions, but is to go, if you go to transitinnovation.org, we have the links to the application and you can see it right away, and it asks a lot of sort of pretty standard questions about the company, your experience, similar working initiatives, links to demos, things like that. Yeah, no big surprises.
Stan with Microsoft Data Innovation Labs. Beyond the pilot, assuming you guys succeed and you find a vendor that solves the problem, and you go to an RFP or sole source or whatever that vehicle is, has there been conversations about the actual funding for the implementation of whatever solution you choose?
Sorry, I think this is the same question before. So you're saying after the pilot, is there funding? Is that what you're saying?
Right.
So just to recap, if there's a successful pilot and everyone's interested in continuing to work together, the sort of standard next step would be a competitive solicitation or RFP that New York City Transit would offer, except, you know, on a case-by-case basis, if there's a clear, if it's clear that this is, you know, something that's not available on the market anywhere else. But again, determination would be made at a later time.
Well, I mean, I think with regard to funding, you know, the answer is if you're going to double the speed of our buses, we'll find the money to pay for the system.
Thank you.
You know, if you're going to save us a boatload of money, we'll come up with the funding to explore your idea.
Especially double the speed.
Great. Any more? Okay.
So another question about the subway. What official channels, or unofficial, I suppose, does the MTA have to communicate? Like you were saying, you're always 15 or 20 minutes behind Twitter. What are these channels that are running behind? Are they official or are they unofficial?
So it's basically what you see in the system. It's things like our countdown clocks. It's the displays that you see above subway entrances. It's, you know, MTA.info and our mobile apps, our own Twitter account. You know, it's basically sort of the whole spectrum of official channels, which is, you know, various digital media and feeds. And really, that's it. Of course, there is sort of the other side of it as well, which is providing information internally so that, you know, say for example, conductors can make announcements on trains, things like that. So, you know, some of it is, you know, sort of more automated. It's just, you know, let's put a message on the screen. Some of it's more, you know, let's tell this person that a disruption is happening so that then they can go and make an announcement on their train or something like that.
Great. Do you have any data about those different channels and like the usage statistics? Like your Twitter account, for example?
Yes. Yeah, certainly for... Yeah, for social, yes. For first-party channels, yes. The one area where it's a little bit hazier is the impact of our feeds, because, you know, basically, you know, they go into the major third-party apps, and, you know, it's not like we get stats from Google or Apple or any of the other major third-party apps. So that's sort of a nebulous area. We can speak to social, we can speak to first-party apps and the web, but of course our feeds go into a lot of places that are sort of a black box to us.
Are those like first-party apps and stuff, are the usage statistics there published anywhere?
Not at present.
Okay.
Yeah.
But we could, I think it's a good question, and maybe a resource we could add to the website, just sort of list out, here are the different communications channels to keep in mind for the subway challenge. Yeah. Okay, great. Again, whoever wants to go first, the two of you. Yeah.
All right. I guess for Sunil, my assumption is you guys have kind of a God view of where all the buses are at any given time. Is that an internal system or one you have from a third party?
No, that's an internal system. So we have GPS devices on all of our buses. Mm-hmm. All of these buses transmit their real-time location every 30 seconds, and that feed is sent out publicly for consumption. So you have it already.
But does it just give you location, or does it give you any analytics about that
So it
Does
gives
it give
you
you any analytics about the health of the fleet itself? Or just
No,
like
it does not. It doesn't give you any analytics about the health of the fleet, but it gives you the vehicle location, the route that the vehicle is running on, the run that the vehicle is running on, and the direction. So that's, that's public information.
Does Wi-Fi work at every platform?
On the subway?
Yes.
Yes.
Any other questions?
Hi, I'm Steve Kettle. I'm a subway signal engineer. I have a question about I have two questions. One is about funding. I noticed that the challenge has a few venture capitalist partners. Will there be an opportunity for them to evaluate and perhaps privately discuss funding options?
So we have a fantastic slate of VCs who are our private sector evaluators, and including some of just the strongest investors in the mobility space and the data. So that's great. Their role in this is not to provide venture funding. So I would say that's not a part of the program. They are, and in fact, if they have invested in a company, they have to recuse themselves from that process. So I would say that's not baked into the program, and we wouldn't want to put them in that position. They're here to share their expertise about the about their various sectors. What I would note is that, hopefully being able to deploy something, deploy a successful pilot with the MTA is a very successful proof point in showing product market fit for your company that could later on lead to funding opportunities. Okay, any?
Just one more thing. I was wondering if we could do a poll of how many people are here for each challenge.
Okay, so anyone want, if people want to say, I guess, how many people here are interested in the subway challenge? Okay. How many people are interested in the bus challenge? Great. It really feels like 50-50, which is fantastic. So it's good to see. Thanks. Okay, one more question and then we're going to wrap up.
Yeah, it's for Sunil. I saw you posted one video. I was wondering if you have any other videos, especially those showing bus lanes. So buses in bus lanes or buses navigating around bus lane obstructions.
We can post it.
Okay, we can post that.
Cool.
Okay. Great. So before we move into, we have some time for more sort of informal networking. We have some lovely refreshments. We encourage you to stay. I just want to take a moment to thank everyone who's up at this table. And unfortunately, we weren't able to hear from Seema, but Sam, Seema, Kurt, and Sunil have been critical to this program. It would not be happening without their participation, and we are so grateful to them for that and for making this possible. And we're very excited to be working together. So please join me in a round of applause, and we hope that you'll. So thanks so much. Please enjoy. And again, Natalia, the director of the Transit Tech Lab, is here, and she can answer questions as well. So thank you so much.